Okay, so let's look at the buttonhole hooks and eyes and bars. So here's the sample. Now, what I would like to say is that, if you need more practice with this, take one of these samples and do all buttons and buttonholes all the way down. Do all hooks and eyes all the way down. Do hooks and loops all the way down. So let's first look at the buttons. So let's take this apart. So I'm going to undo my buttonholes here, and the hooks and eyes. Okay, and let's just separate these out next to each other. So now remember that I did not have, these buttonholes were done by a home sewing machine. I do not have an access at this point to a industrial buttonhole machine, but they look just like the same thing. So I went through that buttonhole process. So if you're at home, your buttonholes should look like these. And I know I need to clip these extra threads here. Clip your extra threads before you turn it in. I didn't do that, so I might, circle that. But these buttonholes look really great. They're in alignment with where the buttons are. And the buttons I would actually probably look at a little bit closer. But for the buttonholes, remember, this is the outside, the right side or the left side, which is the top side of your garment. And then the buttons come through here. So I want to make sure that these look really nice and clean. So I flip this over, and I also want to look at the inside, make sure the stitching is consistent and it doesn't look messed up here. So we want to make sure that the inside is just as nice as the outside. So let's have a look at these buttons. I'm very particular about how they are sewn on. So I crisscross these. So in your design details on your pattern card, you would actually need to make a note that these are crisscross and not going straight bars across to either the holes. So mine are crisscross. That's how I chose to sew them on. So if your pattern card says that they are straight bars going across, then you would actually need to write that down, and I would have had to have sewn them going straight across each other. So what I'm particular about, I'm going to flip this over, is that I don't really see a lot of crazy stitches out here, that all of the stitching on the inside is stitched on the same place. So we just see one point of where those stitchings are. Now remember, we do need to see the stitching because we need to make sure that those stitches are grabbing all the layers of the fabric. We just don't want the stitching all around here. So these look great. And remember, on the inside, if we look at the button here, this is where all the work is done. We started here and we ended here. We also wrapped the thread around a few times to give it some distance. Because if you look, the width of the fabric there needs to be some space between that button and the fabric so that this fabric can fit between the button and the other fabric nice and flat, and it doesn't pucker. So that's what I would be looking for. These are great buttons. So moving on to the hook and eye here, these two here, what I'm looking for is, let me fold this fabric here, get this closer up here. I'm looking for consistent stitching around the outside of each of these loops. And then I'm also making sure that we did one stitch here to hold the head of this hook here down so it doesn't go anywhere. And then on the outside, I'm going to make sure that I don't see any indentations or any stitching on the outside. So that's what I would be looking for. And also with the hook and the bar, that the stitching is clean, consistent, nice and neat, and I don't see any extra threads or knotting on the outside of anywhere. And again, that I don't see anything happening on the outside. The other thing that I would look for is making sure that these all line up with each other, right? That the height or length is actually consistent, and that it doesn't actually get out of alignment, and everything is lined up correctly. So it's hard to see that when you have so many different types of closures here. We have the buttons and buttonholes, the hooks and eyes, and the hooks and loops. Again, the hooks and eyes are usually seen on tops and the tops of zippers on dresses, and the hook and bar are generally seen on pants and skirts. However, depending on what your design details, maybe you use those in other ways. But of course, everything should be in alignment, and the center of your garment, which would be your center front or your center back or the center of wherever you're putting your closures, is where that center line for each of the closures go. So, right, I would make sure that all of those centers were all lined up appropriately. And that's how you know when everything is closed that that placket or whatever the alignment of your closure is lines up and it doesn't veer off in one direction. But if your closures look like this and they're as consistent, you've got some good samples here.